Hello again, everybody. It's time once again for Coco and Dalts. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalts.
And we've got for you a treat. We have a sports-tacular.
Woo!
So for this episode of Coco and Dalts, we're going to talk about nothing but sporting events and their fallout on the world today.
Their fallout. And we should mention that we are maybe not experts, but we do have a little bit of experience in the field of sports because we are both former sports journalists. So...
Once a sports journalist, always a sports journalist. That's the way I feel.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, really?
I've moved on.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coco's my name. Yoga is my game.
You should trademark that. That's pretty good.
I totes should.
So for our first subject...
What's that, D?
And our sports-tacular!
Woo!
We are going to talk about the NHL at the All-Star break. And people are like, what? Why are they leading with that? But wait.
Well, Dalts is Canadian, so
Exactly.
Not to deal in stereotypes, but...
This is the sport that I most follow, most enjoy, and have actually participated in at a high level until I was 15. Decided to go drinking in high school.
Which, you're only 39, so that wasn't that long ago.
That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the NHL right now. So looking at the standings, the NHL standings right now, Tampa Bay is the number one team in the NHL. The number two team in the NHL overall, Vegas Golden Knights.
That's still a dumb name, but okay.
Not going to disagree there. So I don't know why the whole, why not Las Vegas?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we should Google foo that and find out why they did that.
Well, I know that when I was in that particular industry, there wasn't really a logical explanation for it. But I think my logic for it was that Vegas is down in the alphabetical ladder as opposed to Las Vegas, which is kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so, you want to be either near the top or the bottom. That's my logic.
Or we could just blame it on Bettman.
That's a good, solid reason right there.
I mean, he sucks, so just blame him for everything.
So speaking of Commissioner Bettman, today at the annual All-Star Game press conference thingy, he had a State of the Nation kind of thing, and he talked about many things, including his continued denial that CTE and concussions are related. But he also talked about the New York Islanders arena situation. So for those people who are not familiar with it, the Islanders were at Nassar County Coliseum for many, many years. In fact, their entire life of their franchise. The arena was outdated. They needed to move. So they moved to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Which is a nice venue.
Very nice facility. Basketball first and pretty much basketball only. It's where the Nets play. And as a result, there were a lot of obstructed seats, and it turned out to be a bit of a debacle for the Islanders, which I know it's hard to believe because that's a team that usually does things well and classy.
Like when they sold to a guy who
didn't have any money.
Yeah.
John Spano.
Yeah.
Good example. So, the announcement today was that now they're waiting for a new rink to be built near the Belmont in New York area. And while they're doing that, they're going to play 12 games next year at Nassau County Coliseum. So they're going to play a few games there, and then they're going to play the rest of the games at the Barclays. So this is just another example of the Islanders just not winning anything at all.
Okay, so why did they move in the first place then? To try to get some of that sweet Brooklyn cash? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
I think they tried to tap into that hipster market, which is really into hockey. The hipsters are really following the hockey.
In their skinny jeans out on the ice.
Right. And their beards.
Yeah.
And their plaid and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think they were tapping into that, but they were also, I think, playing a bit of a game of chicken with Nassau County because they wanted to get improvements paid for by the county to the arena.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the arena is Nassau County. I've been there. I've seen games there. It's a bit of an old 70s barn, no question about it. Definitely not an NHL quality arena, but the sight lines were really good. The fans loved it. The fans were, you're right on top of the action there, as opposed to the modern marble coliseums that they build these days, where you're far away and all that sort of stuff. So it was definitely an arena that was outdated, but the trouble was that the fans had to travel into the city to go to Brooklyn.
Right.
The players had to travel into the city because they all lived out near the practice facility.
I
so
remember
they're riding the LIR.
Yeah, I remember seeing that like Sports Center segment with like all the players on the train.
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Like from Pee Wee hockey when you get dressed in all your equipment except your skates.
Yeah.
And then you're standing on the train.
Yeah.
Next stop, Barclays Center. Oh, this is where we get off. So that was an interesting update today. I think it's the NHL. They're not spinning it this way, but a little bit red-faced on the whole Islanders situation.
The NHL left red-faced over something?
Not admitting it, of course, is the way they did. And I think this will have a big effect. So John Tavares, who is their superstar captain.
Number 1 pick overall, right?
Number 1 pick overall. Yeah. A premier player in the league, has played many a game for that team. He's the only team he's played for in the NHL. He's a pending unrestricted free agent this coming July. Oh. And so there's a bit of mystery as to whether he's going to re-sign or he's going to run for his life to a franchise that is actually good and has got his stuff together.
Yeah.
So this might be a preemptive move in that direction. And also the arena that's coming near the Belmont that they're having built and will be built by 2020, I believe.
So 2 more years at least of uncertainty and instability with the Islanders. Yeah.
So I'm thinking John Tavares he's a quality, classy guy. He's never going to say, oh, this franchise has got to get his acting gear, but he's got to be thinking it. He's got to be like, what have I got to do to get some decent players around me and get in a decent building and all that sort of stuff. So
if you had to handicap another team that he would go to, what would you think it would be?
I'm glad you asked me that question.
We didn't rehearse this.
This is not rehearsed. So there had been speculation that the Maple Leafs would be a good fit for him. Oh. He's from the area, as many Canadian players are from Ontario, Southern Ontario.
Is he from Peterborough?
No, he is not.
Ah,
he's from the Toronto area, and he's from the Toronto area. So that would be a logical fit. However, the pressure on him and the spotlight and everything like that would just be so intense. He could handle it, but it would be very intense. There was also talk of him going to Tampa being the number 1 team in the NHL, as we talked about. Mm-hmm. The Detroit Red Wings would be a good fit because they're terrible, but they're a great franchise.
Right,
they've got a great new building. Mm-hmm. Storied and Original Six and that sort of thing. And they've got some good players there, but they're sort of like in a bit of a rebuilding phase right now. So there are a few teams out there that he would fit with.
If he went to Toronto, though, I mean, he'd be sharing the spotlight with Austin Matthews. So
that's true. That is true. And Austin Matthews and John Tavares 1-2 down the middle. That would be a pretty good combination.
There you go. You heard it here on Coco and Dalts.
So
first.
Put your money down on that. Other things that they announced, the NHL is opening its season in Stockholm next year.
Oh, I like Stockholm.
Oilers and the New Jersey Devils, 2 teams that you would think would be good representatives internationally.
Especially when, like, all the Devils fans, like, the opposing team's lineup is called, and it'll be John Tavares, and they go, sucks! And Austin Matthews, sucks! Like, yeah, that's really making our country look great on the international stage.
Tour around the world in Stockholm. Yeah. For sure. And the NHL is also going to be going to Finland. The Jets are going to play in Finland, which makes sense because Patrick Laine, who is the new Teemu Selanne, and Teemu Selanne used to play for the Jets, obviously, back in the day. So that makes a lot of sense to do that. But the other factor that they were talking about was they're going to be returning to China, as they did this season, to play some games. However, they're TBD on that. And I think probably the TBD is dependent upon how the Olympics fare, which the NHL players are not going to, and also if there's like war in the area.
Yeah. If nuclear war breaks out with North Korea, like perhaps that's maybe not a good place to go to.
They're not hitting the road.
No.
They're not going to China for road games.
No, definitely not.
So that's the NHL, and that also, I think, qualifies us to have hockey in our tagline where we have hockey, culture, and life, and we haven't done anything on hockey until now.
That tagline was written when one of us was actually still working in sports journalism, so we intended to talk about hockey much more than we have so far. But this is only episode 6, so I think, right. I don't think that we've fallen down too much.
You don't think we're going to get criticized in the media for not having hockey in the first 5 podcasts?
Well, aside from our single drunken Swedish listener who maybe might go to the exhibition game next year in Stockholm.
He might be there. We could get him to correspond for us.
Oh, we could. Yeah. Hey, Lars, here's a Let's do a Skype interview.
As we tape this, just in on today, the day of the taping. Speaking of Sweden, sad to hear the passing of the founder of IKEA. 91 years old.
Yeah, that's very sad.
That's a somber moment. I don't mean to bring the podcast down, but I think we've all felt the IKEA love / frustration.
We should go to our nearest IKEA and get some cinnamon rolls.
We should.
And drown our sorrows.
We should.
Because those things are awesome.
They are delicious, and they're very affordable.
They are, yeah.
Okay, so let's move along. I think we should move to the second segment, which we're talking about the Michigan State controversy. Coco, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Oh, sure.
I think you might have an opinion on this.
Why do you think that I have opinions on things?
Was it grinding the teeth while you were looking at your phone? Gave it away.
So I'm not going to recap all the details because they're just horrifying, regardless of your gender. You should be horrified at what happened. Give us a little bit of background, though. But yeah, so Dr. Larry Nassar, he's a physician. Obviously, he worked with USA Gymnastics. He was on the Michigan State staff. More than 160 women have come forward to say that he sexually abused and assaulted them over the course of at least the past 8 years. I believe the first report that Michigan State got was in 2010, maybe? Although I'm probably wrong about that. Maybe 2016. But so he's been abusing women and girls for a very long time. Michigan State did a whole lot to not address this issue. After they received the first report, they didn't follow up with any other potential victims for several months. They didn't suspend him. They basically enabled him to continue abusing women and young girls. I believe the youngest victim was 6 years old at the time, and I believe she was a family friend. So
I'm just reading a story here online, just a little bit of background or clarity to what you were saying. It was as far back as 1997, athletes began telling multiple MSU officials, including the university's longtime gymnastics coach, that Nassar was assaulting them under the guise of medical treatment. That's
okay, so it's 21 years now.
At least, yeah.
And I believe maybe I don't know. I know 2010 factors in there somewhere in the timeline. Maybe that was when the NCAA became aware of it. But
yes, it is.
Yeah, so speaking of the NCAA president Mark Emmert said this weekend that he doesn't have enough information on the situation, not only with Larry Nassar, but also there are some Michigan State football and basketball players, I believe, who are accused of also sexually assaulting women, and he says he doesn't have enough information to comment on that. And I call just total BS on the NCAA. They are an awful organization. They don't care about children being abused as long as they make that sweet cash off athletics. Look at the Penn State situation.
Yep.
I know people think that the NCAA can overstep its, moral arbiter bounds by what they did with Penn State, but Penn State, systematically covered up the abuse of young boys by Jerry Sandusky for how many years? At least a decade. And they didn't get the death penalty. They did get some pretty harsh sanctions, which a lot of were reversed a couple years later. Mm-hmm. So why is a kid getting a shoebox full of cash worth more sanctions-wise to the NCAA than children and young adults being abused for decades by people on athletic staffs?
Well, this all comes down to the big gravy train that is the NCAA.
Right.
Big gravy cash train that anybody can stick their hands into it as long as you're not a student.
Please don't say stick your hands into it.
Sorry.
Okay, when we're talking about Larry Nassar, woo!
Anybody can feed at the trough of funds in the NCAA, and if you get in the way of that, then that's when the NCAA gets upset. And that's why you have, when students are perceived to be receiving payments, they're actually penalized for that, and they get the money taken away or whatever sanctions are levied against them. It's because it's money. It has nothing to do with anything else. I mean, it's all about greed.
the last major program that received the NCAA death penalty was the SMU football team in, I believe, 1987.
Wow.
And somebody, a couple teams have received it since then, but they're the Morehouse, the Morehead State tennis team or whatever.
Right,
so nothing
nothing consequential.
Yeah, nothing that anybody would remotely care about who was not attached to that particular team.
Yeah.
And I know it's been said that the NCAA saw what the death penalty did to SMU and said, we don't really want to do that again because that had way worse consequences than we anticipated. But if you're not going to give the death penalty to Penn State, who knowingly covered up Jerry Sandusky raping little boys for years, then if you're a D1 team, you can just give all your recruits hookers and blow and shoeboxes full of cash because nothing is ever going to happen to you. They're never going to use the death penalty if they're not going to use it in that situation.
And so explain to the people who don't know, including myself, what exactly the death penalty is.
Oh, geez. Well, it's at least 2 years.
It's extreme.
Yeah.
Measures suspension of a program.
Yeah, it's 2 years of not... Oh, wait, here it is. I just lost it. They ban a school from competing in a sport for at least 1 year. I thought it was 2 years, but apparently it's just one. So that's... they lose their scholarships and all that stuff.
So they can't compete, they can't practice, they can't recruit?
Right, that...
For a year.
Yeah. Yeah, so in 1985, the NCAA Council passed the Repeat Violator Rule, which stipulates that if a second major violation occurs at any institution within 5 years of being on probation in the same sport or another sport, that institution can be barred from competing in the sport involved in the second violation for either 1 or 2 seasons. And a school can also be stripped of its right to vote at NCAA conventions for 4 years.
Wow.
So
I think the thing that I come away with this from is why don't they just pay the athletes?
They should.
So a football player is putting his brain on the line every time, on the line, almost, I would say literally, but I don't like the use of literally, but he's putting his brain out there every time he goes on the field.
Right.
His long-term future, his mental health and well-being for the rest of his life, he's putting that on his line every time he goes to a practice, to a game, and yet he's not getting paid for it. He's not allowed to get paid for it. But the schools are able to charge for admission, charge for souvenirs and merchandise and all that sort of stuff. So why wouldn't we just pay the players, and then that would at least ease the consciences a little bit?
Right. I mean, when you've got third-string kickers eating ramen 3 meals a day, what's it really going to... a school like Bama or Ohio State that's raking in a ton of cash from TV contracts and boosters, throw some money that kid's way. Give them even just $10,000 for a school year is going to make a huge difference in that kid's ability to function.
And all these big schools have these really well-moneyed alumni who could help bankroll some of this stuff and help pay for with all the contacts that they have and everything like that, help provide cheaper clothing or whatever, food, shelter, that kind of thing.
Right. But then, so in the 90s, the University of Michigan, the Fab Five, they had their Final Four appearances vacated and a lot of their wins vacated because I believe it was even after their last Final Four appearance before C-Webb got drafted, Chris Webber, I guess he took some money from a Michigan booster, and the NCAA flipped out about that. And even though he wasn't competing, he was still technically an amateur, so they vacated all that stuff. Really, C-Webb is gone. He's done. He's not having anything to do with your program anymore after that timeout.
Yep. That
wasn't a timeout that caused them to lose the championship game, and that's worse than hundreds of girls being abused by a doctor on the Michigan State staff.
I hope this has got to be an eye-opener for the NCAA, just the way that Hollywood has gone through an eye-opener in some ways, and hopefully that's a culture change. Hopefully that's a tipping point for a culture change, because this can't continue. This kind of behavior cannot be condoned. I'm not going out on a limb here and saying this, but I think that somebody's got to be saying this. Somebody in the positions of power have got to be saying, stop this. This is brutal behavior. This should be a place of safety and learning and sanctity rather than these horrible things that go on and then get covered up.
Right. Well, and even in the pros, it happens too. I mean, look at Ray Rice. There's video of him knocking his fiance out in an elevator, and the NFL was just basically going to slap him on the wrist until people were like...
Until people got a hold of the video.
Right. Till people... I mean, it was bad enough without the video evidence, but then you see the video and...
But the optics were terrible for the NFL.
Right. And then they finally came down, like, more harshly on him and stuff. But still, I mean, it shouldn't take that. Like, you should... just because this guy is really good at his job shouldn't have anything to do with, and you shouldn't protect that to make more money.
You're absolutely right. I want to do an awkward segue here, and you're talking about somebody who's really good at their job.
That would be you.
Very nice. But not right. But not what I was going for. Very good at his job is Roger Federer, who won his 20th Grand Slam at the Australian Open this weekend as we tape this. I know, Coco, that you are a huge Roger Federer fan.
I hate him.
So tell us why, in a nutshell, and something that the kids can listen to.
He's a smug D-bag. There we go.
But wouldn't you be smug if you had 20 Grand Slam wins?
I wouldn't sit there and tell reporters after I won Wimbledon last year or whatever that my own performance made me cry. Like, how arrogant are you? Like, really? And every time he loses to somebody, it's not because the other person was better. Like, he just, I hate that guy.
So he's a sore winner and a sore loser.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he's got 20 Grand Slam wins. I think he's the greatest of all time.
I don't think you can have in tennis a greatest of all time conversation.
So he's 36 years old.
Which
is...
Tennis is a young man's game.
Exactly. Usually you're winning in your early 20s, right? He's 36. He's winning. He's still effective. He's still banging out the Grand Slams. He's won 3 of the last 5. So he's, considering everything he's done to this point, and then you add in at 36, he's doing really well. I got to say he's the greatest of all time. You have a different opinion on the greatest of all time, and you know tennis better than I do. So
I do. I don't think you can have a greatest of all time conversation in tennis because the eras are so different, especially... Well, he just got his 20th slam, but he's been to every slam in the past, 20 years or however long he's been a pro. Like back in the 70s, people didn't go to Australia in the beginning of the Open era because it's
too far away.
It's too far away. They want to take a break. Like Borg.
They speak a different language there. Oh, no, that's not it.
Like Borg went to Australia once in his career.
Right.
Like Jimmy Connors, I think, went twice, and Christy Everett skipped it 5 years in a row, and I think Johnny Mack only went a couple times in his career. So
that would be John McEnroe.
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
For those who are not familiar.
Letting my journalism first reference flag fly here. So if collecting slams were a thing in the 70s like it is now, like how many would Borg have?
Right.
Like how many would...
McEnroe.
Right. How many would those guys have? So... It's just such a different era now, and then you add in the differences in training and nutrition, and
but you have that. You have those factors, I think, in every sport in terms of hockey sticks are a lot lighter and stronger than they used to be.
Right.
But I still think you can talk about Sidney Crosby being one of the greatest of all time.
Right. I think you can talk about he's one of the greatest of all time. And maybe, especially in tennis, you can even break it down by surface. And you can say, this guy is the greatest on grass, and this guy is clearly the greatest on clay or whatever. But I just don't think era to era you can say, this guy, boom,
definitively,
he's clearly number one overall. Like, Laver never could have beaten him or whatever. Like, you give Laver the rackets and the nutrition and the training and stuff now.
And the running shoes.
Right, and the shoes. And
the shorts that aren't those white restrictive ones that they used to wear.
Right. Like, he's not wearing the sweater vest. And
so smoking a pipe.
Right, and the old wooden racket, like, who knows? So I don't think that you can make that argument in tennis.
I know when we were talking about this earlier in our room full of advisors when we were getting feedback on the show and we were taking it to market studies and stuff like that. And we were talking earlier about Serena Williams. And I was talking about if it wasn't for her, women's tennis would be a mess. I looked it up, and actually Serena Williams is the same age as Roger Federer, which I've forgotten about. So you could probably say that same thing about men's tennis if it hasn't been for Roger Federer. He's been at the top for a long time, at or near the top for a long time. Same thing with Serena. So these are two really special athletes that are performing, I think, at the peak of their game, still at 36. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Like you said, tennis is a young person's game, and they're still at the height of their profession at 36. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's very physically demanding, especially those hard courts. I mean, I can't imagine. Like, I'm not that much older than Federer, and I've got 2 bad knees. Like, I can't imagine running around.
And you haven't been playing tennis on the surfaces all those years.
Exactly. Like, I can't imagine being this age or just a shade younger and running around on a hard court for maybe even 5 hours, if you go to a 5-setter with a men's match at the Slams.
In Australia, when they had heat warnings and things like that, and
it's
the
100
bouncing
degrees
off
out.
the surface. Yeah. And people are looking at you. That's the part I couldn't handle. I could play tennis and dive all over the place and everything like that. People are looking at you. They're watching.
You're going to get out on the driveway and bounce a ball against the garage door.
I would be the world champion of bouncing the ball against the garage door open.
If anybody is listening, Coco and Dalts has a Facebook page now, and I will post video of Dalts.
Don't say that, because now you're going to have to. By the way, that website is called, ready for it? Write it down. CocoandDalts.com.
All one word. The and is spelled out, no ampersand.
No ampersand or anything funny like that. Coming to a website or an internet browser near you.
We should also probably mention, speaking of the Australian Open, Caroline Wozniacki won the women's final. This is her first Grand Slam singles title. She first got the number 1 ranking, in 2010, and it took her a little over 7 years to win her first Grand Slam singles title. So congratulations to Caroline.
At age 27. So to win your first slam at age 27 is pretty impressive. And she is from Denmark, which I didn't know.
She is. Her parents are Polish, but they moved to Denmark, I believe, when her dad was a professional soccer player and he signed with the team there.
Look at you dropping the knowledge.
So she's 100% Polish ethnically, but she's lived her whole life in Denmark and speaks the language and trains there and blah, blah, blah. So
yes, congratulations to her and to Roger Federer, who is the greatest of all time. Speaking of the greatest of all time, Tiger Woods also came back this weekend.
Oh, God.
And so we need to talk about him because he's a big deal.
Another D-bag. This is just like a really bad day for the podcast.
This is a celebration of sports. It's not a celebration of ne'er-do-wells and bad actors.
We do tend to go negative on the podcast.
We do.
I apologize to our single drunken Swedish listener.
Well, we like to make fun of people, so that's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
We give and we get. So he played in his first, Tiger Woods that is, played in his first full field event in almost 3 years, apparently.
Wow.
Finished tied for 23rd. He was playing in the Farmers Insurance Open, which is at Torrey Pines. Dun, da, da, da. You remember that commercial? Farmers. Anyway.
No.
It's a pretty funny commercial. Usually.
Okay. Sounds funny.
Tiger Woods playing okay, got heckled a little bit, but managed to finish tied for 23rd. So this guy is one of the greatest golfers of all time, if not the greatest golfers of all time. On the course.
You think he's potentially the GOAT of golf?
I think him and Nicklaus are 1 and 2 right there. Yeah, Nicklaus has more majors, 18 to 14, but I think that considering the competition, you were talking about nutrition and everything like that,
equipment,
and of the modern era in tennis, I think the equivalent in golf, the fact that Tiger had dominated for so long in the 2000s and the 1990s as well, that part of the 1990s, that he, to me, has got to be considered that. Now, off the course, I will use my Canadian understatement and say, not a great guy.
That's a good way of putting it.
And so I wonder how his legacy will be seen now that he's gone through all the troubles and he went through years ago with the domestic dispute and the painkiller addictions and things like that have really taken him down a sorted path. He seems to be back. Whether he performs at the same level as he did previously is questionable because of the physical toll that golf takes on you, especially the way he played. He was sort of like the Rafael Nadal of golf because his body was contorted pretty extremely in that game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tiger Woods, but he came back this weekend, and I know you have an opinion on this.
Well, I've done too much talking already in this podcast, so let's hear more from you.
Well, I think I gave my Tiger Woods opinion. I think he's
Wow.
I think he's the greatest of all time. Him and Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus did the same sort of thing comparably in his era. He dominated with the same equipment and everything like that.
So you think even with Tiger's arrest a few months ago for, what was it? He was pulled. The cops pulled over because he was on the side of the road. He passed out.
He was impaired. He had too many painkillers.
Like Vicodin or something like that. Like you think that was just a few months ago. So you think that's not going to have an influence?
I think him getting into the Golf Hall of Fame or whatever, I don't think I think he's going to get in, no question about it.
Right.
It's just more of what's the public going to think of his legacy? 20 years from now, somebody says Tiger Woods, what are you going to think of? And it's probably going to be the disaster that happened around him. It's probably not going to be the dominant win at the U.S. Open or the dominant win at the Masters. These brilliant displays of talent that he had and utterly lapped the field, which is unfortunate in some ways, but it's also, you can't separate the personal from the professional, especially if you're that much of a bad guy off the competitive field.
Right. I mean, how many times did he yell at people, like bystanders on the course you shouldn't take a picture when somebody's, in, full swing mode. But I mean, he was just he never had a good attitude. He was never going to stop and sign autographs and take pictures with people. And
I always it was funny how people talk about golfers being disturbed by noises during their backswing and all that sort of stuff. It's like, come on, suck it up. I mean, really?
Yeah.
You just don't have like a 400-pound lineman rushing at you, or
that's true,
or a slap shot headed at your head, or something like that. Like, just concentrate. Just concentrate more.
Yeah,
hit the ball. Hit the small white ball.
Is it against golf rules to get like earplugs or something
I don't know.
to put them in when you're at the tee or whatever?
I remember, this is going to date me, but there used to be a Canadian golfer, his name was Richard Zokol, and he used to wear, when he played, a Walkman.
Oh my God, really?
And they called him Disco Dick Zokol.
Oh, that is awesome.
That just came back to me now as we were talking about this. So apparently he stopped doing that at some point, but I don't know if there must be some sort of no iPods rule in the books, because you could have play-by-play on there. There's no policing what's being played in your ears, right?
Right, or you could have your coach saying, use the 9-iron or something.
Exactly.
Although, who's going to do that? Like, if you just get like noise-canceling headphones or something, like
that would be awesome. See somebody on the tee,
right? Like walking around with like Beats by Dre, like
bopping their head up and down. No music. Nobody else can hear the music, but they're bopping their head. Right. That would be a good tool at the Waste Management Open, which is this weekend with the infamous 17th hole. Is it 17th hole or 16th hole?
I don't know. You've played that course, right?
I have played that course, yes. The Waste Management Open, where they have that par 3 where they have the stands all the way around the hole, and then there's people that cheer, and there's all sorts of hooting and hollering and jeering. It's like the anti-golf hole. And the TPC in Scottsdale, that's where the Waste Management Open is, and it's at the stadium course there, and it's one of the most spectacular sights. If you've never seen it in golf, it's worth watching that. That's what golf should be to me, is people cheering and hooting and hollering, and they still are respectful when there is when people are teeing off and the players are teeing off, but it gets a little nutty. But it just shows you that, and the players love it. The players are on the tee, getting everybody riled up, and if you got decent players that are not intimidated by it. But it just shows me that the players could tolerate that kind of thing. So if there was noise on the course, they'd be into it, that kind of thing.
So that's this coming weekend that the Waste Management Open is coming up. Maybe
That's right.
maybe we should try to
go to it.
Or watch it. I don't watch the golf unless it's the majors, so
we should watch that.
We should definitely watch it. I'd be interested in seeing the crazy hole.
The crazy hole.
Yeah,
it's worth watching. I think that was pretty much all we had for the sports-tacular special edition of Coco and Dalts. So,
can you tell listeners that we were both once sports journalists?
we really wanted to talk about sports. So for another week of the podcast, and we'll be joining hopefully soon again with another edition. Maybe a music special will be coming up.
What?
Yes, with the Grammys and everything that's going on there. So for another week of the podcast, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalts.